ahead and get started. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Norfolk. I ask that everyone mutes their phones or mutes their computers, and we'll ask you to unmute as you have a role in today's meeting. We'll get started with our music. For those of you who are visiting, we are a singing club. So Eleanor, lead us in song.
Comedy.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to start with R-O-T-A-R-Y.
R-O-T-A-R-Y.
That spells Rotary.
R-O-T-A-R-Y is known on land and sea. From north to south, from east to west, he profits most who serves the best. R-O-T-A-R-Y, that spells Rotary. Or something like that.
Okay, the next one, on the 9th of March, somebody named Amerigo Vespucci was born in 1454, apparently. So the question is, why is America called America? Well, you read of various things, but I think we'll call the one America North and South was named shortly after Columbus. And he was the first person to say that the New World was not the West Indies, but a new country, a separate continent. And the first use of America was in 1507 when a new world map was created based on his explorations. So now Roger has a little funny piece before we sing this, God Bless America.
The man the cartographer who created the map that showed our continent was named Amerigo Vespucci. And this unknown place up there was called Amerigo's land. And so Amerigo's became America. And this is a good thing, because otherwise we would be singing, God bless Vespucci land. And that's just not good.
So now we'll do God Bless America.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the ocean white with storm. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. In my club, we would now shout, play ball.
Thank you, Eleanor and Roger. We really appreciate it. And now if you will join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And now the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And Bob Healy.
And will it be fun?
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. And now Jim Sell will be giving us our invocation.
Let us pray. For friends, good fun, and the fellowship of Rotary, we give our sincere thanks. In these days of isolation, may these tokens of God's bounty renew our spirits, enliven our hearts, and act as a preparation for the challenges that are ours in Rotary. Keep us always mindful of the needs of others and keep us always attuned to our calling in Rotary. We ask these things in the name of God's eternal truth. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jim. Okay, and our visitation report, I do not see Joe Massey, but I'll let you know that Ann Morgan is home from the hospital and is still recuperating, still working on getting herself, back to 100%. So please keep her in your thoughts and prayers. Is there anyone else that we know of in the club who requires our attention, or we should reach out to? Who may not be well. All right then. Introduction of guests. We, in addition to Lacey, who will be speaking with us, as I mentioned earlier, we have Major Donald Doman with us from the Salvation Army. I will tell you that we voted to approve the nomination of Donald last night at the board meeting, and we will all be voting on him at next week's meeting. So keep your eyes peeled when I send out the president's letter that I'll be including Donald's application also. So welcome to the Rotary Club of Norfolk, Donald. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Jim, for that introduction. Just a little bit about me. I've been with the Salvation Army now for 17 years, and I'm an officer in the Salvation Army. And so just like the military, as officers, they rotate us around throughout the country. And so my wife and my two children, I have a 17-year-old son who is a junior in high school at Western Branch High School. Well, right now virtually, but whenever he goes back to school, it'll be Western Branch High School. And our daughter, she's in 8th grade. Her name is Morgan, and she is at Jolliffe Middle School. And my wife is Laura, and we've been married for, this year will be 21 years. But with the Salvation Army, we recently moved here in June of 2020 from Richmond. And so I've been with Rotary for many years, since 2008. And that was back when I was in New Bern, North Carolina, and then spent some time down in Gastonia, North Carolina, then Lynchburg, Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, and now here in Norfolk. So we're happy to be here, even though it's kind of a strange time to move into a new place. But we're settling in, and certainly look forward to being with the group here in Norfolk.
Well, thank you, and welcome, and pretty confident in saying we look forward to having you as part of our group. So thanks for joining us today. Our school of the week this week is Sherwood Forest Elementary School, and our scribe for this week is Walt Sobek. So please, if you're speaking or have a part in the meeting, please speak clearly so we can be accurate. As I mentioned, keep an eye out I'll be attaching Donald's application so we can all review it, and we'll vote on his membership next week on the 16th. Community service update. Walt, you have some things you'd like to let us know about?
I do. This is going to be a busy month for us in terms of volunteers. I'm hoping that as people get their vaccines and go through that process, that we get more and more volunteers to show up for our community engagement events. The first of the is actually tomorrow, and it's at the food bank. And I signed us up for 8 slots, and we currently have 6 people that have volunteered. But looking on their board, our group is supposed to be part of a 20-person group, and right now they have, including our 8 slots, if we fill them all, they still have 8 slots that are unanswered at this point. So I'd ask you, the members of our club, that if you have time tomorrow morning between 9 and 12, to please join us at the food bank. If you just drop me a line, I'll, by the end of today, I need to submit a kind of a roster of who the volunteers are, and that just makes checking easier for our members. The next event we have coming up is at the Basilica, downtown Norfolk, and that's basically a food pantry. And I requested 5 slots for that opportunity. That's a little longer shift. That's from 8 to 11:30, and it's again downtown Norfolk. The population that pantry serves is the same population that sends their children to the Hunton YMCA. So it's a good opportunity for us to interact with that same group of individuals. The last thing I have scheduled is on the 30th of this month. We're going to be doing Keep Norfolk Beautiful one more time. And we're going to go to Baroud Park. I hope I'm saying that correctly. We've done that park last year. We're going to go back. It hasn't been tended to since the last time we did it. So I'm guessing it's going to be an effort. And I'm right now projecting from 9:30 to noon. We'll probably get out of there before noon, given the turnout we had last time. And the last time it was cold, it was rainy, and we still had about a dozen people show up to walk around the park. So our members keep showing up and keep supporting the community. And it always makes me feel good to be able to put things together like this and watch people show up and at least be able to talk to members that we haven't seen in a long time. So that's just an added bonus of going to these various activities. Back to you, Jim.
Walt, would you mind just quickly repeating those dates again?
So tomorrow, the 10th of March, from 9 to noon, we are going to the food bank. And because of the social distancing and building capacity, they ask us to not show up for more members than the building can hold. So that's why we're kind of registering in advance. So if you'll just drop me a line or go on Club Runner and sign up for that, that'd be outstanding. The next event is March 24th, and that's at the Basilica in downtown Norfolk, and that is from 8 to 11:30. And the final event is March 30th from 9:30 to noon, and that's just a cleanup of Baroud Park, which is off Tidewater. And those are the 3 events for this month. And if anybody has any ideas of doing something different for April, I can take that into account as I'm starting to plan that right now. And Marty, I will try to schedule something other than Wednesdays for all these events.
Thanks, Walt. Appreciate all you're doing in spearheading this effort. You brought up the Hunton. Just wanted to give everyone a quick update. According to Bill Moore, who I did not see on the call at the meeting, he says we're about 70% complete with our Hunton Zoom room project, and it looks like right now we're going to be able to provide about 6 or 7 Chromebooks to them as backups for students that are attending virtual classes while they're there. So again, the relationship with the Hunton Y continues, and we're doing some wonderful work there, and hopefully we can get there soon at some point, to see everything that's been going on. Michael, can you give us a little bit of an update on the 2021 grants process?
So the grant deadline was the end of February. We have received well over 60 applications. Lisa, our club secretary, Lisa Barnes, is now compiling them all and categorizing them and putting them in a spreadsheet. I'll then be convening the grants committee to look over them. That will happen probably the first last week in March, first week of April, and hopefully have some selections by mid-April. A lot of new names this year, which is really great. And a lot of folks were very appreciative that we relaxed the restriction on if you've gotten one in the last few years, you couldn't reapply because so many groups are hurting. So lots of appreciation for the good work we're doing.
Thank you. Thanks for that update. And just to remind everyone, our budget for this year's grant season is basically $50,000. So the committee will be looking to put that money to good use. Okay, Happy Bucks. Who has some good news they'd like to share, or who would like to drop a dime on a fellow Rotarian? Joe New.
I've got Happy Bucks because this morning's paper announced that Virginia Tech's basketball coach Mike Young was awarded the ACC Basketball Coach of the Year for helping Virginia Tech end up being third in the ACC this season. So go Hokies.
All right, some Happy Bucks for the Hokies. Who else has some good news to share? Eleanor.
I would like to put in about $10 for a better musical performance today than last week. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Although it was great, but everyone did actually get to hear you if they paid attention to my email.
Oh boy.
So I have some Happy Bucks because there's lots of fresh faces here today. It's good to see. It's good to see a lot of people here, and I've been really pleased with the reception that we've been getting with the club members for our virtual meetings. I will let you know that discussions did start at last night's board meeting. Probably a little bit premature, but at least talking about what getting back together in person could look like. So stay tuned. It's going to be an evolving process, and a lot of it's going to be based upon guidance that we get, both from health officials within the government, and also some guidance from Rotary. So just know that it's on the radar screen, and everyone wants to get back to in-person meetings. Anyone else with some good news they'd like to share? All right, for our visitors, basically we use this as an opportunity with Happy Bucks to raise some money for Norfolk Rotary Charities, which is our charitable arm, and it helps us go a long way towards making our annual distributions from our grant process. All right, our Vice President in charge of programs is Lori Harrison, and Lori, you have the stage.
Okay, thank you. Our Rotarian of the day is Joe New, and I'm really impressed, Joe. He has been a Rotarian for 45 years, which is great. His favorite part of Rotary is the international exchange programs. And a fun fact is that he has been able to do many of his makeup meetings at different locations. Twice he did it in Dublin, Ireland. He's been to New Orleans, and he tried to attend one in Spain. I can't pronounce the town, but it was a thwarted effort because of St. John's feast day. So Joe, thank you so much for being a Rotarian of the day and introducing Lacey.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's my pleasure. I really enjoy getting this opportunity to introduce Lacey. I had the privilege about a year ago, just before the pandemic shut us all down from having face-to-face meetings, to hear Lacey give a very similar version of this presentation to the Tidewater chapter of the Appalachian Trail Club. And she's going to talk to us about what one of our own agencies, Hampton Roads Sanitation District, is doing to try to make sure we have fresh water for our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren in the future. Lacey is a community education and outreach specialist with HRSD. She's worked as an environmental educator for the past 6 years. She has graduated from UVA with a BA in environmental thought and practice, and has earned a master's degree from Regent University in public administration and public leadership. She eagerly cultivates partnerships that increase awareness of understanding of environmental issues, and especially likes working with children to develop their skills so they can resolve some of the environmental issues we face in our region. Lacey was awarded the 2018 Community Builders Award, which recognizes outstanding community-oriented achievements for people in Hampton Roads. Lacey is from here. She graduated from Virginia Beach High Schools. She's married to her middle school sweetheart, and they have one son, are expecting a daughter in June. Lacey, welcome to the Norfolk Rotary Club.
Thank you so much. That was so kind of you all. Thank you. So as Joe introduced, my name is Lacey Weaver and I work at HRSD. So I will just make a note. So prior to working at HRC, I started here about 3 years ago. I actually worked for Keep Norfolk Beautiful. So I'm so excited that you guys are doing a cleanup in Burrard Park. So that's one of the biggest parks in Norfolk, and it has a lot of litter. So the fact that you guys are dedicated to consistently going out and cleaning that park, it just warms my heart because we used to try to put a lot of work and a lot of efforts in keeping that park clean. So thank you all for that. That was incredible to hear. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and talk to you guys a little bit about our SWIFT initiative at HRSD. So I do have a video to share, and I've been doing this virtual thing for a few months now, and it's hit or miss with how well my internet will display this video. So if it starts getting a little laggy and doesn't work very well, I'll just put the link to the video in the chat and you guys can watch it kind of whenever you get a chance. So let's do this. And you guys can feel free to stop me and ask questions, or we can just do questions at the end, whichever works best for you. I'm going to full screen this. All right, thumbs up. Can everyone see that? Awesome. Okay. So SWIFT, the Sustainable Water Initiative for Tomorrow. It's one initiative with many, many benefits, and we'll kind of go through that today. So before we jump into SWIFT, I just want to give you a little background on HRSD. Some people pay us every month or every other month and don't exactly know what we do. So I like to take this opportunity to kind of let you guys know what we do and where the SWIFT water starts. So we provide a service to 18 cities and counties with an area of over 3,000 square miles and a population of 1.7 million. We're actually growing. Soon we will even be extending into the Eastern Shore. So we will be even larger and be adding on another plant. At the same time, because of SWIFT, we'll be decommissioning some of our plants as well. So these numbers will change a bit, but we do service the Hampton Roads area, cleaning their dirty water. So our mission is to protect public health in the waters of Hampton Roads by cleaning wastewater effectively. I love this picture and I love to chat about it. So this picture was actually taken in Portsmouth prior to HRC being created, so prior to 1940. And you can see children are playing outside, and inside of this ditch is actually sewage. This is raw sewage, dirty water. And the reason for that is because prior to HRSD being created, there was no sewage treatment. So sewage would often be discharged into open ditches or directly into the waterway. What they found was happening was that so much sewage was being discharged into the waterways that it was actually ruining the health of the Chesapeake Bay. And when people were getting oysters from the Chesapeake Bay, they were getting sick. So the health department kind of had to figure out what to do about this. And through that, HRSD was created. And so since then, we have been cleaning wastewater and treating it before discharging it back out in the Chesapeake Bay. We clean this wastewater to the standards that are set mostly by the EPA according to what we call the TMDL, which stands for the total maximum daily load. And this lets us know exactly how much nitrogen and phosphorus we can discharge out into the Chesapeake Bay in a healthy way so that the bay can still be able to thrive as it's intended to. So our vision is for future generations to inherit clean waterways, but also be able to keep them clean. And we feel like SWIFT perfectly blends with this, and we'll kind of get into that in a minute. So here is the video. We're going to give this a try, you all. Let's hope technology is on our side.
The Potomac Aquifer, a massive, ancient, water-bearing geological formation, lies beneath the entire Hampton Roads region and beyond. It also lies at the heart of a sustainable future for our growing communities. To understand why, we need to take a trip back in time. The early settlers to the region found water free-flowing from their wells in seemingly limitless supplies. Plentiful water supply spurred the growth of Hampton Roads. Up until the early 1900s, groundwater wells needed valves, not pumps, to regulate the water flow. However, the rapid growth of the region created a new set of environmental challenges, as groundwater levels in the aquifer have dropped over 200 feet in the last 100 years. There is no longer enough natural pressure to push the water from deep in the aquifer to the ground surface above, and water must be pumped from wells. Water flowed up from the ground because the Potomac Aquifer is a confined aquifer. In a confined aquifer, layers of rock and clay not only trap water in the aquifer, but also prevent water from recharging the aquifer from above. It is only at a very narrow location along the fall zone that precipitation is able to recharge the aquifer directly. This location is over 150 feet above sea level, which allows the force of gravity to pressurize the aquifer. And at nearly 90 miles inland, it can take thousands of years for rainwater to move down from the fall zone into the depths from which we are now drawing water. As water levels have dropped, the lack of water pressure in the aquifer causes layers of clay to be squeezed by the weight of soils above, and areas of land begin to sink. This is called land subsidence. In an era of shifting climates and rising seas, this makes us more susceptible to flooding during storms. Another problem occurs in coastal areas. As fresh water is drained from the aquifer, there is a tendency for salt water to move in to replace it, making the fresh water that is left unusable. This is called saltwater intrusion. Without intervention, these issues will threaten our health and prosperity here in Eastern Virginia. HRSD is fighting back with SWIFT, the Sustainable Water Initiative for Tomorrow. The Potomac Aquifer will be recharged using SWIFT water, wastewater treated to meet drinking water standards and matched to the chemistry of the water in the aquifer. SWIFT water will create a pressure barrier that protects us from saltwater intrusion. Evidence also shows that SWIFT water may slow, stop, or even reverse land subsidence caused by overuse of the aquifer. In one case, a tool called an extensometer measured a ground surface rebound after a significant nearby withdrawal was halted. At the heart of SWIFT, we are returning water into the ground, creating an accelerated water cycle, and creating a sustainable future for all of us in Eastern Virginia.
All right, awesome. I'm so glad that worked. We'll move on to the next slide. Does anyone have any questions about that video? I am going to dive a little bit deeper into what the video talked about, but just generally, does anyone have any questions?
How much water are you pumping in now?
So we do about 1 million gallons a day. Since this is our research center where we're recharging the water currently, we're not always recharging. So sometimes we go offline to do maintenance, to test different things out. So it's not always that we're recharging into the ground, but generally we're doing 1 million gallons per day. Anyone else?
Is there a downside? Or are there unintended consequences that could come about from this?
That's a really good question. Right now, a lot of what we're seeing is that the benefits are outweighing the downsides a lot. So a potential downside could be if we ever put anything into the aquifer that didn't exactly match the chemistry of the aquifer. Obviously, for obvious reasons, that's bad, but also because it could cause some of the things that are in the clay to leach out. So things like arsenic, and it could contaminate and foul out the groundwater. So that is a major concern and something that we have to be aware of. And that's why the way that SWIFT is set up there are these critical control points, that's what we call them. And they're basically checkpoints along the process. So if the water at any point in time is testing at a level that is not appropriate to move on to the next level, that water is immediately sent back to our Mansman treatment plant. And a lot of times that will happen before we even have figured out what's wrong, because that's how it's set up. We backwash first and then ask questions later. That's kind of how I like to say it. Because we have to make sure that anything that we put into the aquifer directly matches the chemistry of the aquifer. So that's one thing that I would say that we have to make sure that we're very, very cautious of.
Thanks.
Anything else before I keep going? Okay, so this is a little graphic that just kind of lets you know what's happening currently. So as most of you know, the dirty water, as long as you're on the public system in Hampton Roads, that goes down your toilets, your sinks, your faucets, your dishwashers, comes from your faucet down your drain, your washing machine. It travels to one of our treatment plants and we clean that water and to meet the standards or better than the standards set. And we discharge it out into the Chesapeake Bay, and eventually the Chesapeake Bay flows into the Atlantic Ocean. And that's how things are working currently. About 20% of people are actually getting their water from the aquifer. They're drawing it up from wells already, but most people are getting their water from surface water. So we don't deal with cleaning the water that comes to your tap, only cleaning the water once it's used or dirty, what we call wastewater and some people call sewage. So that's basically kind of showing a little bit of what's happening right now. Oops. Now the future. So with SWIFT, the same process will happen. You will get your surface water and it'll go to your home, and then that water will be cleaned by HRSD still. But that water for most of the treatment plants will be going to our SWIFT facility. Now, we will be building more SWIFT facilities. Right now, we only have the research center. We'll be building about 5 other SWIFT facilities. We're calling them full-scale facilities because they will have the capacity to take probably up to about 90% of what we're currently discharging. So instead of discharging that water out into the Chesapeake Bay or the Atlantic Ocean and essentially wasting it, we will be reusing that water by cleaning it through our SWIFT water process to drinking water quality standards and putting it into the ground. And there's a lot of benefits that go along with that. The video talked about pretty much all of them, all of the big ones that I mentioned. One of them for us that's really big is regulatory stability. So as I said before, we follow the TMDL, the Bay Act. We have to make sure that we are cleaning the water properly to the standards that the Chesapeake Bay can take. What we found over the years is that the standards and regulations continue to get more stringent and more strict. And our infrastructure has been in place since the 1940s. So continuously upgrading our infrastructure is extremely costly. And what someone kind of posed one day a few years ago is, what would happen if we just clean the water to drinking water standards? And like a lot of things at HRSD, we said, well, what if, maybe we can do it. And so through cost benefit analysis and lots of research and talks, we've realized that we can do it. And so that not only helps the region, but it helps us by essentially bypassing a lot of those regulatory stability regulations that we need to follow, because we're cleaning the water way better than anything that we would put out into the Chesapeake Bay. It also provides a sustainable supply of groundwater. So we have found that the Potomac Aquifer is naturally recharged by rainwater. We learned that in like 3rd grade. And so what we found is that we're actually using more groundwater than the rainwater is naturally replenishing because we're in a confined aquifer. And so the rainwater takes so long to get through the Potomac Aquifer, we're using more than is naturally replenished, and we could potentially be in a situation where we run out of water. So by helping to put more water into the aquifer, we're helping long-term to make sure that we have water available. Saw something in the chat. I'm not sure if it's for me, but I'm gonna look. What do you do with the nutrients and other things that you extract from the water? So the question was, what do you do with nutrients and other things you extract from the water? So there are a bunch of different processes to clean the water, the wastewater treatment processes. But one of the things that we do is there's something called an aeration tank. And in that tank, we introduce what we call bugs, but they're microorganisms, and they actually eat the bad stuff that we don't want inside of the water. So it's a biological way of cleaning the water from a lot of those things that we don't want in the water. So that's one of the ways that we get rid of the water, get rid of those excess nutrients, and then we continue to send that water through the rest of the process. All right. So this here is just a look of the SWIFT Research Center and what it looks like. So we tried to build this facility with the environment in mind and tried to make it as efficient as we could. So some of the materials that are used to build this building are actually like reclaimed and reused. You can see that there are solar panels on top. So it doesn't generate enough solar energy to power the entire thing, but it does generate a significant amount of solar energy, which we are fortunate for. You can't see it from this picture, but there's also a cistern on the side, and that cistern holds a few thousand gallons of water, of rainwater, so we can use that to irrigate the land, which is a pretty awesome benefit. But this facility is actually located in Suffolk, And so generally I give tours of the facility, and people can come in and then they can actually see the facility. They can look down at the top. You can look down and see the process floor, and I can walk through each point of the process so people can understand how it all works. And then at the end of the tour, we allow people to actually taste the water. So obviously with COVID, we're not giving any tours at this point, but I would love to have you guys come out and meet me out here for an official tour when we're open and able to do that again. So these are just a few clips from what the research center looks like. We have this multi-purpose room that we use, and that room I use to bring kids in and kind of chat with them about the Swift Research Center, the Potomac Aquifer, and the water cycle. Most of the videos that we have, they're all on these kiosks where you can kind of self-guide yourself and learn more about each of the process parts. Also at the bottom, you can see kind of our learning wall that has a lot of different points and pieces that we like to point out that refer us back to the clean water. And then we have this well that we have outside. It's mostly used for photo op purposes. That's where people love to take their photos, but we usually serve the water inside instead of at this well. So this facility was designed to always be a research center so that we're always testing and finding out more ways to make Swift water even better. We also have a lot of students that are working on their masters usually in ODU or at Virginia Tech, and they come and they work as interns at HRSD, and they're doing a lot of research also and doing their final papers and their theses on what research they're doing at the Swift Research Center. So that's kind of how this will always stay. It will always be our education hub and where we bring people in to see. So this just talks about each step of the process. I don't want to get too technical and too into each step, but there's the flocculation and sedimentation part, and this part makes sure that the water is as clear as possible. So it gets out all of those really fine pieces of dirt by making those dirt pieces stick together so that they're bigger clumps and they fall to the bottom, and so the clear water can move to the next step of the process. We have ozone and biofiltration. Those two work really well together. The ozone kind of makes, I like to say it pre-chews a lot of those total organic carbons or contaminants that we don't want present in the water that may get through the wastewater stream. So for example, those things are like sweeteners, things like pharmaceuticals that we may have a tough time getting out in our wastewater treatment plant process, but we have to get out in our drinking water quality process because we are following the Safe Drinking Water Act. So ozone breaks that down so that the biofiltration, the bioorganisms that are in that filter can actually eat those contaminants that we don't want. So similar to the wastewater treatment process and the fact that we are trying to introduce biological means to clean the water. The granular activated carbon, or GAC, that pretty much like activated charcoal. And so that helps to get out anything that the biofiltration and ozone contact couldn't get out. And so that helps us just make sure that we've gotten all those contaminants out. UV disinfection, it breaks apart the pathogens, the DNA of any pathogens that may have formed. There's some chlorine contact, and that makes sure that there's no growth in the well as we put the water into the ground. And then we have to adjust the pH to make sure that that pH matches the pH of the water in the Potomac Aquifer. And we do all that before we recharge. So that is pretty much how our Swift process works. That's what our Swift process looks like. And I'm here to answer any questions you guys have to the best of my ability.
Are there other HRSD-like facilities around the country that are doing the same thing that you're doing with the recharging of the aquifer? And a second question, if you can remember it, with all the rain we had in February, we had a lot of standing water on the ground because our water tables are high. Does any of that leach down into the aquifer eventually?
Those are great questions. So the first question is, yes, this is done in other places around the country, but also around the world. One of the places that was visited to kind of get some ideas for SWIFT was in California. As you guys know, California is their leaders in sustainability and things of that nature. So one thing that makes us unique than a lot of other places, though, is that we are putting our water back into the ground for future use. So other places like California, they're a little different because they have droughts. They don't always have water, so they need that water more immediately than we do. So that aquifer recharge piece is a little bit different, but taking wastewater and bringing it to drinking water quality standards is not something that's new or inventive of HRSD, but the aquifer recharge piece does make us a little bit unique. The second question is, yes, eventually that water, for the most part, it can soak back into the ground, but where our Potomac Aquifer, the actual place where it goes down into the Potomac Aquifer is actually up in Richmond, and that's where the fall line is, where the water seeps into the Potomac Aquifer. So in that video, it kind of showed you a view of the Potomac Aquifer, and then that was that arrow that was moving extremely slowly into the Potomac Aquifer, and that right there is where most of the water goes into the aquifer.
Lacey, I have a question for you.
Okay.
First, wonderful presentation, very informative. Are there any man-made contaminants that are very problematic doing as far as the filtration process is concerned? And
For sure. For sure. So we're actually working on creating what we call a fact sheet of contaminants of emerging concern is what we call them. But overall, in general, we are screening for over 700 different contaminants. I could not name them all for you, but we have someone that really specializes in that. That's her jam. That's what she focuses on within the SWIFT process. She's on our water quality team. But one of the things that we kind of chat about the most, and that I guess are in the headlines the most, are things like the sweeteners, like I told you about earlier, things like pharmaceuticals. So when people flush medications down the toilet, and then also microplastics is a big one too. And so we are testing down to the trillionth, I want to say that's the scale that we're testing down to. Incredibly small amount to make sure that the levels are undetectable by the time they pass through those critical control points.
So, Lacey, you have one facility now, is that right? And
yes.
The plans are for more. And I mean, our water from, say, Virginia Beach comes from North Carolina. I mean, there's a lot of water activity, and you have a lot of facilities, but they're not all SWIFT. So there's more than one? Are there plans for more than one?
Yeah, so there should be about 5 in total. So like I said, right now we have the research center, that's our, if you will, our testing site, and we're recharging about 1 million gallons per day. So that water comes from the Nansman treatment plant. We call it the final effluent. So it's the water that would go into the Chesapeake Bay. About 1 million gallons is diverted to SWIFT. So that's what's happening right now. What we're hoping is that we can build 5 full-scale facilities at select treatment plants within HRSD. And so for the most part, almost all of our plants will be able to have some sort of SWIFT aspect to them. So they'll either have a SWIFT facility there, or the water will be diverted in order to allow it to get to a facility that can then turn it to SWIFT water. The one treatment plant that I know for sure that will not have a SWIFT facility is our Atlantic treatment plant in Virginia Beach. And that's because the water from the Atlantic treatment plant goes directly into the Atlantic Ocean. And the standards for discharging into the Atlantic Ocean are different than the Chesapeake Bay, because the Chesapeake Bay is very sensitive estuary. I'm sure you guys kind of can see that. As I said, we also have in the future 2 plants that are coming offline. There is a lot of work that has to be done to the plants to make the water good enough to then turn into swift water. So right now we're focusing on our James River treatment plant, and we're making sure that we upgrade the James River wastewater treatment plant site in order to make the water of good quality to then send it to Swift and have a Swift facility there.
Thank you.
No problem.
Can I ask one more?
Sure.
What's the ultimate goal of gallons pumped back into the aquifer?
So I believe it'll be somewhere between 70 to 90% of what we're doing now. And so on a daily basis, we can do maybe 120 to 150 million gallons a day in terms of what we clean, what comes to us. And we have a capacity of 229 million gallons a day. So I would say probably up to 120 million gallons a day. That's probably a high number, but somewhere in that range. It's a little difficult to tell exactly. 1 or 2 years ago, it was one thing, and now it's a little bit different. Getting the land to build these SWIFT facilities and make sure that we have everything on that land, because we need to have monitoring wells, which have to be a certain distance apart. It has been a little bit more tricky in terms of building than we originally anticipated. So things have been shifted around a little bit. So right now, that's a roundabout of what I can tell you. So hopefully that answers your question.
How soon?
Oh, go ahead.
How soon might we expect one of these other 5 facilities to start putting water back in the aquifer? Are we talking about 3 years or 8 years or?
We're hoping soon. So our James River treatment plant, our general manager is really shooting for breaking ground in the fall. So we are hoping that is what we're going to be able to do. That is everyone's goal right now, is to break ground at our James River treatment plant in the fall.
Is your funding state, local, pay for it? How are you funding these facilities?
So we are a ratepayer funded organization. So most of our funding does come from ratepayers. We do have things like bonds that we get. We did receive an incredibly large amount of money from the EPA to help to spearhead this project, which was incredible. Something like $225 million to help out with this project, which we're extremely happy about, for sure. And
I have one other question.
Okay.
We've had a presentation, I think it was last year or the year before last, from the various individuals that are responsible for providing drinking water here in the city of Norfolk. What kind of organizational relationship exists between that agency and what you're currently doing?
Can you say it one more time, the beginning part? What did the organization do? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. We had a presentation, I think last year, from someone from Norfolk that spoke about the water treatment plant over at Lake Taylor and how that water is processed and the quality of that water. And I was wondering about the organizational relationship between that agency with the city and what you're currently doing.
That's an awesome question. We work very closely with the other agencies in Hampton Roads for various reasons. So one thing that I do personally is I sit on a regional committee through the HRPDC, the Hampton Roads Planning District Committee, and I am on their educational board. And so I am on the FOG committee for fats, oils, and grease, but I'm also I'm an advisor on the Water Awareness Committee. And those are awesome because it brings together people that specialize in water quality and fats, oils, and grease from each of the cities and counties and all of Hampton Roads. And we're the outlier because we represent all of them. But it's awesome because we are in constant communication with them. And that's just my role. There are other people within the organization that work even more closely with them. But we also, for Norfolk, you guys have a combined HRUBS bill. And so we have to constantly be in contact with the Norfolk Utilities Department because Norfolk reads your meter and they send those meter readings to us. And based on what your meter is, how much water you've used, we assume if you use that much water, then we're cleaning that much water. And so that's how we bill you based on what Norfolk tells us. So we have to be in constant communication with them. And I'm grateful, we have good relationships with them. We're also in relationships with them, just thinking about the other person in my department with construction. So any construction projects that we have going on that kind of affect both of us, we are having monthly meetings, weekly meetings, things like that. So it's a good relationship for sure. And then I had a question in the chat and I think I lost it. Okay, here we go. Trying to get it, let's see. Does the pH balance change over time? Not that I'm aware of. I have not known that it changes. I believe, I'm gonna look here. Yes, the pH is set at 7.6. That's the pH that we are making sure that our water is before we put it into the aquifer. But I do know that we are constantly monitoring the Potomac Aquifer. So we have something called monitoring wells. So we have a 50-foot monitoring well, which literally just monitors the water 50 feet from where we recharge. And just to give you an idea of how slowly the water moves, it takes about 3 days for that water to move 50 feet. So that's how slowly the water is moving in the Potomac Aquifer. And then we have 3 other wells that are further out, and they are measuring the upper Potomac Aquifer, the middle Potomac Aquifer, and the lower Potomac Aquifer, because those are the 3 levels in the aquifer. And what we're measuring is called conductivity, and it measures the salinity in the water. And so we will know when our swift water gets to those other wells because we expect a drop in the conductivity. The video kind of alluded to the fact that we see a lot of saltwater intrusion. So because we've pulled up so much water from the aquifer, it's allowed salt water to contaminate our freshwater source. And when you go into an aquifer, you're getting groundwater, you expect fresh water. So the fact that there's a lot of salt in there is an indication that there is some saltwater intrusion. And so by us, doing SWIFT, we're hoping to be able to push some of that salt water back out, and we're constantly measuring that. So if there is a change, then I'm sure they'll be notified immediately because you can literally look at the monitor as they're monitoring it every day. I got another question here. What are the end markers for success? Is the health of the Chesapeake and Elizabeth River involved as outcomes? That's a good question too. Yes. So for us, really success looks like being able to do our job as best as possible. And that is being able to treat wastewater as best as we can, but also that future generations piece. So if you think about it, we're helping to recycle water. We're helping to be able to build a sustainable supply of water for the future. And that's absolutely incredible. So what we're projecting right now, according to what we'll be recharging, is we will be pretty much equaling the demand in the Potomac Aquifer. So we're not going above and beyond in terms of how much we're putting in the Potomac Aquifer, but essentially we're equaling demand. Because our job is to make sure that we're keeping water as clean as possible and keeping the water clean in the Chesapeake Bay. So by avoiding adding excess nutrients to the Chesapeake Bay and removing those before we put it into the Potomac Aquifer, we still are putting the health of the Chesapeake Bay first. And
any other questions for Lacey? Well, Lacey, thank you very much. This was an awesome presentation. You did a great job learned a lot. Absolutely learned a lot from this.
Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, and you're welcome back and to keep us informed anytime you want.
Awesome.
Did want to let you know that our club is very focused on childhood literacy. And one of the things we do to honor your presentation is we dedicate a book in your honor to our School of the Week. And our School of the Week this week has been or is Sherwood Forest Elementary School. So we will be sending them a book engraved commemorating your attendance at today's meeting. And we really appreciate you joining us, and we really appreciate your message.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys as well. Let me know if you have any questions through email.
Okay. Thank you very much. Do want to let everyone know that our next meeting is next Tuesday, March 16th, and we will be hearing from the Virginia Arts Festival and what's going on with them in their upcoming season. Diana, do we know who's joining us?
We
You're
do.
muted.
Rob, yes, Rob Cross will.
Okay.
Yeah, Rob will make the presentation, and I will say to you, the last time that Rob Cross actually came and presented to the Rotary, we had a flood, if you will recall, here at the Arts Festival. So we're past the flood, and we're moving on to 2021.
Awesome. That's great. We look forward to it. Well, once again, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Lacey, for a wonderful presentation, and we'll see everyone next week. We are adjourned.